Stop for a moment and listen with your heart instead of your ears, because God and Archangel Michael say that sometimes the most powerful warnings do not come as loud voices from outside but as quiet messages rising from within. And when a loved one has passed away, their presence does not return as a ghost or a literal voice, it returns as memory, intuition, conscience and emotional awareness, and this is what people often misunderstand. They think guidance must come from somewhere supernatural, but the truth is that the deepest guidance comes from the part of you that was shaped by love, loss, experience and pain, and right now that part of you is trying to get your attention. Because you are walking towards something that feels familiar but is not safe, something that reminds you of the past in ways that comfort you emotionally but endanger you mentally, and this is why the message feels urgent. Because urgency is not fear, urgency is protection, and the phrase, "open this immediately before it's erased forever," does not mean a magical message will disappear, it means your awareness window is closing. Because life gives signals only for a short time before patterns repeat, and if you ignore intuition long enough it becomes silent, not because the warning was wrong, but because you stopped listening, and Archangel Michael represents clarity. Boundaries and truth, not illusions, not emotional dependency, not false hope, and the real voice from the other side is the wiser version of you that has already survived heartbreak, betrayal, regret or loss. And now recognizes the same emotional energy returning in a different form, maybe through a person, a situation, a decision, or even your own habits, and your body already knows something your mind keeps delaying. You feel heaviness when thinking about certain choices, you feel tension when you try to justify them, you feel restlessness when you ignore your inner discomfort, and those are not random feelings, they are emotional warnings. Because the soul speaks through sensation, not words, and when people say, "someone who passed away is trying to warn you," what it really means is that their lessons are trying to protect you. Their memory is trying to guide you. Their absence taught you something you must not forget, and right now you are about to repeat a cycle that once cost you deeply, not necessarily with the same person, but with the same emotional pattern, trusting too quickly, giving too much. Ignoring red flags, believing promises instead of actions, and the reason this message says, "before it's erased forever," is because every time you ignore your intuition, you weaken it, and over time you stop feeling warnings at all, you become numb. And numbness is the most dangerous state, because you walk into harm without resistance, and God says you were not created to live in numbness, you were created to live in awareness. And awareness is uncomfortable at first because it forces you to face truths instead of fantasies, but awareness is what saves you from repeating emotional suffering, and this is why this message feels emotional, heavy and urgent. Because something in your life right now is asking for honesty, not hope, clarity, not comfort, boundaries, not attachment. And the part of you that feels connected to someone who is no longer here is actually connecting to the strength you gained through loss, because loss reshapes perception, it teaches you what truly matters, what truly hurts, what truly lasts. And that wisdom does not disappear when the person leaves, it stays inside you, and now it is activating, warning you not to walk into another emotional trap disguised as opportunity. Not to settle for something that feels familiar but drains your peace, not to ignore the quiet discomfort just because you are tired of being alone or uncertain, and Archangel Michael's role symbolically is to cut illusions, to protect truth. To bring clarity where emotion clouds judgment, and this message is doing exactly that. It is cutting through emotional attachment and reminding you that love should not cost you your self-respect, connection should not require self-betrayal. Hope should not demand blindness, and when people say, "A voice from the other side is calling your name," the real meaning is that your higher self is calling you back to awareness, calling you back to discernment, calling you back to emotional safety, because you have already survived too much to walk blindly again, and the reason this message feels intense is because your soul recognizes the pattern, even if your mind is still making excuses. And God says do not ignore this message, not because something bad will happen magically, but because ignoring inner truth always leads to emotional consequences, and the most painful regrets in life do not come from mistakes. They come from moments when you knew something felt wrong but continued anyway, and right now you are standing at one of those moments, where your intuition is clear but your attachment is strong. Where your heart wants comfort but your soul wants protection, and the message is telling you to choose protection, to choose awareness, to choose long-term peace over short-term emotional relief. Because the person you are becoming deserves a life that feels calm, stable and safe, not another chapter of emotional chaos, and this warning is not about fear of death, it is about respect for life, your time, your emotional energy, your future, and the greatest honor you can give to those you have lost is not waiting for their voices, but applying the lessons their absence taught you, by choosing differently, by setting boundaries, by trusting your intuition, and by finally believing that peace is more valuable than familiarity. Stay with this feeling and do not push it away, because God and Archangel Michael say the reason this message continues to return to you is because something inside you is still unresolved. And unresolved emotions always try to speak before life repeats the same lesson in a stronger form, and many people misunderstand what it means when they feel called by a presence from the past. They imagine something supernatural. But the real truth is far more powerful and far more practical, because what calls you is not a ghost, it is memory, it is experience, it is the emotional imprint left by love, loss, and growth. And those imprints become part of your internal guidance system, your inner alarm, your intuitive radar, and right now that radar is active, because you are standing in a moment where your next decision will shape not just the next few days, but the emotional direction of your life for a long time, and the urgency of this message is not about fear, it is about responsibility, because awareness creates responsibility. Once you feel something is wrong, once you sense emotional danger, once you notice repeated discomfort, you are responsible for how you respond, and ignoring awareness is not innocence, it is avoidance, and avoidance always creates consequences, even when they arrive slowly, and this is why the message feels heavy. Because heaviness is the emotional signal that something needs attention, something needs honesty, something needs to be faced instead of postponed, and Archangel Michael's symbolic role is protection through truth, not protection through illusion. Because illusions feel good temporarily but leave deeper wounds later, while truth may feel uncomfortable at first but saves you from long-term emotional damage. And the reason this message says, "Open this immediately before it's erased forever," is because emotional clarity does not stay forever if it is ignored, intuition weakens when it is repeatedly dismissed. And over time people lose the ability to feel warnings at all, they become numb, detached, emotionally blind, and then they walk into harmful situations without resistance, thinking it is destiny when it is actually repetition. And God says you are being given a moment of clarity right now, a window where your mind and heart are aligned enough to recognize what feels off, what feels heavy, what feels forced, and that window is precious, because once it closes, old habits return, rationalizations return, excuses return, and you start convincing yourself that what feels wrong is not that bad, that you are overthinking, that it will work out. And those phrases are the language of emotional self-betrayal, not faith, not trust, not growth, and the voice from the other side is not asking you to live in fear of the past, it is asking you to learn from it. Because the people who loved you deeply taught you lessons through their presence and their absence, and those lessons exist to protect you, not to haunt you, and when you feel their memory rising during moments of confusion, it is not coincidence. It is integration, your mind connecting past experience with present reality, your subconscious saying, "We have seen this pattern before," your emotional intelligence activating. And emotional intelligence is one of the strongest forms of protection a human can have, because it allows you to recognize danger before it becomes damage, and right now you are being asked to slow down and reflect, not on others, but on yourself. Your choices, your motivations, your patterns, because you may be drawn towards something that feels emotionally familiar but energetically draining, something that promises comfort but costs peace, something that fills silence but creates anxiety. And God says silence is not your enemy, but chaos disguised as connection is, and many people choose emotional noise over inner stillness because stillness forces self-awareness, and self-awareness is uncomfortable, it reveals needs, wounds, insecurities, and unresolved pain, but self-awareness is also the gateway to healing, and healing is what breaks cycles, and cycles are what keep people stuck in repeating emotional stories with different faces. And the reason this message keeps emphasizing warning is because warnings are gifts, not punishments. Warnings give you the chance to choose differently. God warns to protect. And protection sometimes means letting go of attachments that feel comforting but limit growth. Sometimes it means setting boundaries where you once overgave. Sometimes it means saying no where you once said yes out of fear of loneliness or rejection, and the presence you feel from the past is actually reminding you of your own strength, because you survived loss, you survived pain, you survived uncertainty, and that means you are capable of surviving discomfort now in order to avoid deeper pain later, and the message is telling you that your emotional safety matters, your mental peace matters. Your future stability matters more than temporary validation, and when the message says, "A voice is calling your name," it means your higher self is calling you back to awareness, back to discernment, back to responsibility for your emotional well-being, and the greatest tragedy is not losing someone, the greatest tragedy is losing yourself while trying to replace what you lost. And many people unconsciously seek to fill emotional gaps with situations that mirror old patterns, because familiarity feels safer than the unknown, even when familiarity hurts. But God says growth requires entering the unknown with clarity instead of returning to the known with fear, and this message is guiding you toward growth, not through force, but through honesty. Asking you to look at your current emotional landscape and ask yourself simple but powerful questions. Does this situation bring calm or tension? Does it expand my sense of self or shrink it? Does it encourage authenticity or require performance? Does it align with my values or challenge them? And the answers to these questions already exist inside you, you just need to listen without defending, without justifying, without minimizing. And Archangel Michael's symbolic energy is cutting through emotional fog, helping you see what you already sense but hesitate to accept, because acceptance requires change, and change requires courage. And courage is what transforms warnings into wisdom, and wisdom is what turns pain into purpose, and God says this message is not meant to isolate you, it is meant to empower you, to remind you that you are not helpless. Not destined to repeat the same story, not trapped by past emotions, because awareness gives you choice, and choice gives you power, and power used wisely creates peace, and the ultimate meaning of this message is not fear of losing something, but awareness of preserving yourself, preserving your emotional integrity, preserving your future peace, and the greatest respect you can give to those you have lost is not waiting for signs from them, but living a life where their lessons protect you from harm, guide you toward clarity, and help you choose growth over repetition, truth over illusion, and peace over emotional chaos. Stay with your awareness and do not rush to escape the feeling that this message creates, because God and Archangel Michael say that the reason you feel unsettled right now is not because something bad is about to happen, but because something false is about to fall away, and when illusions begin to dissolve the mind feels threatened while the soul feels relieved, and most people mistake that inner tension as fear when in reality it is clarity arriving. And clarity always feels uncomfortable at first because it removes the stories we told ourselves to feel safe, the excuses we created to avoid change, the emotional attachments we held onto because letting go felt more painful than staying. And the so-called voice from the other side is actually the part of you that remembers what happened the last time you ignored your intuition, the part of you that remembers how emotional patterns repeat when lessons are not integrated. The part of you that remembers how you once said, "It will be fine," while feeling something was wrong, and later realized your inner warning had been correct all along, and this is why this message carries such weight. Because it is not introducing new information, it is reminding you of something you already know but have been avoiding, and God says avoidance is not peace, avoidance is delayed pain. And delayed pain always returns stronger because it accumulates beneath the surface, and this is why you may feel emotional pressure building in your life right now, pressure in relationships, pressure in decisions, pressure in your own thoughts. Because unresolved truth creates internal tension, and that tension is a signal, not a problem. It is your inner system trying to recalibrate, trying to protect you from investing energy into something that does not align with your growth. And many people confuse emotional attachment with destiny. They believe that because something feels intense it must be meaningful, but intensity is not always truth. Sometimes it is trauma responding to familiarity. Sometimes it is insecurity seeking validation, sometimes it is loneliness seeking distraction, and God says you are being called to distinguish between connection that nourishes and connection that consumes. Between situations that expand your life and situations that repeat old emotional cycles, and the symbolic presence of Archangel Michael in this message represents the cutting away of emotional confusion, the clearing of mental fog, the strengthening of inner boundaries, because boundaries are not walls, they are filters, they allow what is healthy to enter and keep what is harmful at a distance, and right now your emotional filters are activating. You may feel less patient with certain people, less tolerant of disrespect, less willing to sacrifice your peace for temporary comfort, and these changes are not signs of becoming cold, they are signs of becoming conscious. And consciousness is the highest form of protection, because it allows you to see clearly without emotional distortion, and God says the greatest danger is not external threats, it is internal blindness. The inability to recognize what harms you because it feels familiar, and familiarity is one of the most powerful emotional traps, because the nervous system mistakes it for safety even when it leads to pain. And this is why people return to the same types of relationships, the same emotional environments, the same patterns of overgiving and under-receiving, because their body recognizes the pattern even if their mind knows it is unhealthy. And this message is calling you out of that unconscious repetition, asking you to choose awareness over autopilot, asking you to pause before reacting, to reflect before committing, to listen before trusting. Because your intuition has been trained through experience, not imagination, and experience is the most honest teacher, and God says your experiences were not random, they were shaping your emotional intelligence, sharpening your discernment, strengthening your self-respect, and now those qualities are needed more than ever, because you are entering a phase of life where emotional choices will have long-term consequences, not just temporary feelings. And this is why the message feels so serious, because seriousness is required when growth is at stake, and growth does not mean abandoning love, it means loving with clarity instead of attachment, loving with boundaries instead of sacrifice. Loving without losing yourself in the process, and the warning in this message is not about danger from others, it is about danger from unconscious choices, from repeating emotional scripts without questioning them, from seeking comfort instead of truth, and God says truth may feel lonely at first, but it leads to peace, while comfort without truth feels good at first but leads to emptiness, and this is the crossroads you are standing at now. Whether to continue patterns that feel safe but limit your growth, or to step into uncertainty with awareness and self-trust, and the memory of those who have passed away is not meant to pull you backward into grief. It is meant to push you forward into wisdom, because loss teaches what truly matters, what truly hurts, what truly lasts, and if you allow those lessons to guide your present choices, you transform pain into protection. And that is the deepest meaning of this message, not fear of the unknown, but respect for your own emotional journey, honoring what you have learned, trusting what you feel, and choosing to build a future that feels calm, stable and authentic instead of repeating emotional chaos just because it feels familiar. Remain still within yourself for a moment and notice how this message is not creating fear but creating awareness, because God says fear makes you small while awareness makes you strong. And the reason this message keeps unfolding is because your mind is slowly releasing resistance, slowly allowing truths that were once uncomfortable to become visible, and this is how transformation actually happens. Not through dramatic events but through subtle shifts in perception, through moments where you realize that the things you once tolerated no longer deserve your energy, that the explanations you accepted no longer satisfy your intuition, that the emotional roles you played for others no longer align with who you are becoming, and this inner shift may feel confusing at first because identity is built from habits, and when habits change the mind feels like it is losing control. But God says you are not losing control, you are gaining direction, because control is about forcing outcomes while direction is about trusting inner alignment, and alignment is the state where your actions match your values. Your boundaries match your self-respect, and your choices match your long-term peace. And this message is asking you to evaluate not what you want in the moment, but what you want to live with in the future. Because every emotional decision creates a ripple, and those ripples form the environment of your life, the quality of your relationships, the stability of your inner world, and the way you treat yourself when no one else is watching. And God says the soul does not measure success by attention or approval, it measures success by consistency, by whether your words match your actions, whether your love includes yourself, whether your kindness has limits. Inner world, and the way you treat yourself when no one else is watching. And God says the soul does not measure success by attention or approval, it measures success by consistency, by whether your words match your actions, whether your love includes yourself, whether your kindness has limits. And whether your silence is chosen or forced, and many people believe silence means peace, but silence without self-expression becomes emotional suppression, and suppressed emotions always return as anxiety, fatigue or numbness. And this is why you are being guided to speak truth gently but clearly, to express needs without guilt, to walk away from situations that drain you even if they once mattered, because attachment to the past can block blessings in the present. Not because the past was bad, but because growth requires movement, and staying emotionally in old chapters prevents you from reading new ones, and God says the reason certain memories are resurfacing is not to hurt you, but to show you how far you have come, to show you patterns you no longer need to repeat, to show you emotional instincts that are now wiser than before. And when you feel that quiet voice inside saying, "This feels different," trust it. Because that voice is not fear, it is discernment, and discernment is the ability to sense what aligns with your peace before chaos appears, and this is the true protection Archangel Michael symbolizes in this message, not physical defense, but emotional clarity, mental strength, and spiritual grounding. Because when you are grounded within yourself, external chaos loses power over you, manipulation becomes visible, emotional games feel exhausting, and unnecessary drama becomes easy to avoid. And God says the greatest victory is not changing others, it is changing your reactions, because reactions keep you tied to situations while responses free you from them. And you are being taught to respond now instead of react, to pause before speaking, to observe before deciding, to listen before trusting, because your emotional intelligence has matured, and maturity is not about age, it is about awareness. It is about recognizing that peace is not found in perfect circumstances but in honest self-connection, and this message is not telling you that something terrible is coming. It is telling you that something important is already happening inside you. A quiet reordering of priorities, a deeper respect for your energy, a stronger connection to your intuition, and when this internal shift completes, your external life will reflect it naturally, relationships will change, opportunities will realign. Habits will adjust, and situations that once felt complicated will feel simple. Not because life becomes easy, but because you become clear, and clarity is the greatest protection any soul can ever have. Now understand this carefully, because God says this message is not arriving randomly in your life, it is arriving at a moment when your inner world is becoming strong enough to hold deeper truths. And the soul only receives what it is ready to understand, never before and never after, and this is why certain realizations are forming inside you slowly, like a sunrise instead of a lightning strike. Because lightning shocks the body but sunrise changes the entire environment, and what is happening to you is not a sudden emotional reaction, it is a gradual internal awakening, where you are beginning to sense patterns instead of isolated events. Where you are beginning to observe energy instead of words, intentions instead of promises, actions instead of excuses, and God says this shift is the sign that your consciousness is expanding. Because earlier you searched for meaning in external validation, in people's approval, in outcomes, in signs, but now you are starting to feel meaning inside yourself, in your intuition, in your emotional responses. In the way certain situations either feel aligned or draining, and this is the stage where life begins to teach you through subtle sensations instead of dramatic lessons, through feelings of peace or discomfort instead of rewards or punishments. And when you feel uneasy around something without a logical explanation, do not dismiss it, because logic belongs to the mind but intuition belongs to the soul, and the soul perceives what the mind cannot yet explain. And God says many people ignore intuition because it does not shout, it whispers, and those who learn to listen to whispers no longer need to experience storms, because storms exist to wake up those who refuse to hear. But you are no longer in the phase of storms, you are entering the phase of clarity, and clarity does not come with noise, it comes with silence, with self-observation, with inner honesty. With the courage to admit what no longer feels right even if it once felt safe, and this is why some relationships may start feeling heavy, some conversations may feel repetitive, some goals may feel empty, not because they are wrong, but because you have outgrown the version of yourself that needed them, and growth always feels like loss before it feels like freedom, because the mind attaches to familiarity while the soul seeks evolution. And God says evolution is not about becoming better than others, it is about becoming truer to yourself, and truth is not always comfortable, sometimes it requires distance, sometimes it requires boundaries, sometimes it requires silence. Sometimes it requires letting go of emotional roles you played for years, the healer, the supporter, the listener, the one who always understands, because even good roles can become cages if they prevent you from expressing your own needs. And this message is reminding you that your emotional energy is not unlimited, it is sacred, and whatever you invested in will shape your inner world, your mental health, your spiritual stability, and when you invested in constant stress, unresolved conflicts, emotional labor without reciprocity, your soul becomes tired, not physically, but spiritually, and spiritual fatigue shows up as lack of motivation, emotional numbness, confusion, and a sense of being disconnected from yourself. And God says this disconnection is not a failure, it is a signal that your soul wants a different rhythm, a slower pace, a deeper connection, more authenticity, less performance, more presence, less approval seeking, more self-respect. And when you start honoring these signals, life reorganizes itself around you naturally, people who resonate with your growth stay, those who don't slowly fade, opportunities align with your values instead of your fears. And situations that once felt chaotic begin to feel manageable, not because they disappear, but because you approach them from a grounded place, and grounding means being emotionally present without being emotionally reactive. Mentally aware without being mentally overwhelmed, spiritually connected without being spiritually dependent, and this is the true message Archangel Michael symbolizes here, not supernatural rescue, but inner strength, emotional sovereignty, mental clarity, and the courage to walk your path without constantly needing reassurance. And God says when you trust yourself, you stop asking life to prove anything to you, because you already know who you are, what you deserve, and what you are no longer willing to accept, and this inner knowing is the voice that protects you, guides you, corrects you, and heals you, and once you align with it, no external warning is needed, because you become your own guardian, your own guide, your own source of peace, and this is the highest form of spiritual protection any soul can ever reach. Now God says listen with your heart, not with fear, because the real message being delivered to you is not about loss, danger, or urgency, It is about remembrance, remembrance of who you truly are beneath all the noise, expectations, roles, and emotional burdens you have been carrying for so long. And the soul of every human being goes through phases where it forgets its own power, not because it is weak, but because life slowly teaches people to doubt themselves, to seek approval, to measure their worth through achievements, relationships, and external success, and over time this creates a silent distance between the real self and the conditioned self, and this distance is what causes inner restlessness, emotional confusion, and the feeling that something is missing even when everything seems fine on the surface. And God says this message is appearing in your life at a moment when your soul is ready to close that distance. When you are ready to reconnect with your inner authority instead of constantly looking outward for signs, validations, or warnings, because true protection does not come from avoiding problems. It comes from developing the strength to face reality without losing your center, and when you are centered, no external situation has the power to destroy you emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, because you are no longer living from fear. You are living from awareness, and awareness changes everything. It changes how you react, how you speak, how you choose, how you let go, and how you trust. And God says awareness is the real voice from the other side. Not a voice that predicts the future, but a voice that helps you understand the present deeply, honestly, and compassionately, and when you understand the present, the future naturally aligns. Because most suffering comes from resisting what is happening now, wishing things were different, trying to control outcomes, holding on to people, memories, or identities that no longer match who you are becoming. And growth always feels uncomfortable because it requires releasing emotional attachments that once felt safe, even if they were limiting, and this is why your soul may feel heavy sometimes without a clear reason. Because it is carrying outdated emotional patterns, old fears, unresolved expectations, and unconscious beliefs about what you deserve or